Hello, thank you for being here. For this chunk of time, we're going to take the big picture of arts education, and we're going to zero in on the slice of it that is pertinent to this notion of skills you learn in arts and how that relates to necessary skills in the workplace. It's one part of the larger arts and education puzzle. For advocates, I know a lot of familiar faces here, many people from the arts. And I know 10 years ago, if we were having this conversation about the way arts develop skills for the workplace, there would be a lot of sour faces on the arts people. We weren't happy with that conversation 10 years ago. We felt it was somehow not answering our needs. We were somehow degrading that which we cared about most. And the picture is really changing and moving fairly quickly. That's part of what we'll talk about here. But first, it is such a thrill to be on a stage. I don't get to do this very much anymore, so I'll try to contain myself as much as possible. But I was remembering the true story of my very first day as a teaching artist. There I was, an actor in New York, and didn't have a gig at one point, and instead of waiting tables, I took a job as a teaching artist. I had no skills, but, the arts prepare you for workforce. So I said yes, because I wanted the cash, and the situation was, there was a ballet company up here, and 400 teachers and students out here, and I was to be the sort of education interlocutor to turn this performance event into a learning event. I did not know anything about how to do that, but theater person, yes, I'm your guy. So the event is happening. There are 400 teachers and students out here. They are dancing up a storm up here. I look, and nothing good is going on out here. And I know I now have to do something to turn this disaster into learning, but I don't know what to do. So all I can think to do is I stop the dancers and come down to the audience and say, let me ask a question. How many of you out here take ballet? You think you get a little first-person conversation going. One of the youngsters talks about what it's like to be in ballet class and connected to the dancers up here. Not a single hand goes up out here. I am dying until this little boy in the fourth row, up goes his hand. I am on him, as you say here, like a duck on a June bug. I am on him because he's going to save me. And just before I start asking him what it's like, I hear his teacher lean over and say, Johnny, put your hand down. You don't take ballet. And I heard Johnny say, take ballet? I thought he said hate ballet. It was my first day is in this in-between role of teaching artist, and in some ways it was a harbinger of the subsequent 35 years in that I learned how great the gap is between the art place up here and the rest of life out there. And indeed, that appears in a lot of ways in our society. In fact, one way it appears is the most common gig I am asked to do in business is, Eric, come, we want to do stuff on creativity, but no art. That's very explicit. Creativity, good. It's the future of our country or of our economy, but none of the fluffy, soft, gooey stuff. That is how great the gap is. And I learned there is a role for that interlocutor. There is a role for that person who can go back and forth between and close that gap with the fabric that is actually there, that we have allowed ourselves to, let semantic and social preferences seem like a big separation, when in fact the fabric that connects them is there. And that's largely what I'm going to be talking about tonight, is what is that fabric underneath that actually what you learn in experimenting and exploring in the arts, how does that prepare you to be successful in a job situation, in a real hard job place? It's a big topic. It may seem, I described it as a slice, but it's actually a pretty big topic. And I thought of a number of speeches I could actually give you. I'm going to give you a preview of the speeches you're not going to hear tonight. I would have enjoyed giving each one of these, but let me give you a little preview because they kind of show different ways you could come at this topic. I am not going to get to give the grizzled old man speech. This is the one that describes that this issue of relationship between the arts and workforce learning, workforce preparedness, is a very old issue. In fact, when the arts first came into public schools around 1900, One of the two reasons they came into those schools was for the manual arts. That was the term they used. The belief was that if you got kids working with their hands, largely in music and visual arts, which is why I think those are still the two dominant strains in our schooling, that work with their hands would make them better factory workers. Art for the sake of the workplace. And indeed, although the workplace skills we're looking for in 21st century are not those manual factory skills, that thread is still alive and well. We talk about those skills differently now. We talk about, cognitive skills. In fact, the SCANS Commission, Secretary's Commission on Achieving Necessary Skills, which described the skills needed for the 21st century workforce, launched in 1987 in the first Bush administration under Elizabeth Dole in the U.S. Labor Department. This is not an enclave of the touchy-feely set. They determined there are 5 essential skills to succeed in a 21st century workplace. They included things like social skills, self-management, integrity, the capacity to manage systems, and self-esteem, that these essential skills were better developed in the arts than anywhere else. There's been a recent update to the SCANS Commission report of necessary skills. They're much the same, and again, it is like reading a list of what you learn in the arts. And even more recently, we started to add things like the capacity to use knowledge to solve problems. Or, as Elliot Eisner says, the capacity to make decisions in the absence of rules. This is the environment of the 21st century workplace, and the skills are better developed in the arts. One really poignant moment I had last year was at the first ever worldwide arts education conference thrown by UNESCO. So here, the first time the whole world came together, poignantly, they forgot to invite the U.S. They forgot. And then when they noticed nobody from the U.S. had signed up, they said, let's send out late invitations to the U.S. That's how insignificant we are, both in UNESCO and in the worldwide scene. But as we went for these 4 days, to be truthful, excruciatingly boring 4 days of speech after speech by heads of state and culture ministers and economic ministers at podiums, read. Every single one said the same thing, basically. My country is in despair over its environmental crisis, over its youth mental health crisis, over its AIDS crisis, and we lay these problems at the feet of arts education to save us. After about the third one of these, we're starting to look at each other and think, do they know this is arts education? I mean, we're kind of pitiful and puny in the big picture, and then it became clear that what they were asking for, again and again, creative capacity that allows for the reconceiving of problems. They needed creative problem solvers, and those terms started to appear. And in fact, I was able to conclude, I got to do the closing keynote speech. So I was the guy who got to announce that across the world, we actually were ready to march behind a banner, all of us, and there were 3 words on that banner. The 3 subjects that should be taught across the curriculum around the world, and those 3 words are literacy. People in the arts believe kids should be highly literate. Numeracy. People in the arts believe kids should need to work in numbers and logical thinking. Creativity. And that third piece we have a lot to contribute to, and we better pay serious attention and make sure that our arts education is actually focusing on creativity skills. That it hasn't been our primary focus. Anyway, I'm so sorry you're not going to get to hear that speech. You won't get to hear the trend speech. I was Mr. Trend when I had my business, so this is a very happy speech for me. And if you got to hear it, it's got some very charming little formulations, like in the 80s, the greatest scarcity in America was time, or it was money. And then in the 90s, the greatest scarcity was time. And now in the 20th century, the greatest scarcity is conscious attention in the 21st century. And as we live in a time of permanent partial attention. And the arts are where you learn to use the skills of attention that are the only way you succeed in business. In fact, you do not come up with the original ideas that business values with partial attention. It is a capacity for full attention that creates the breakthrough ideas. You would have heard some of the very common descriptions of the journey of our education system, from an agrarian model to an industrial model to the information age. You've heard all this. And then the knowledge age that now, by trend analysts, is being described as the creative era. And as I read in a book recently, the two most valuable capacities in the conceptual era, creative era we're in, they need creators and empathizers. Those are the skills that will be of highest need in our coming economy. Creators and empathizers, exactly where the arts live. In fact, I was remembering my friend Bonnie O'Neill reminded me of a story I've heard subsequent, that Peter Drucker, the business guru, I mean, this is hardcore business stuff. He was asked, what is the single most important course of study for someone who's trained and getting an MBA to really launch a business career? What is the single most important course that's going to make a difference to that career? And his answer was poetry. And when I've heard him expound on that, the quality of thinking, the skills involved in being able to write a poem and decode a poem written by someone else are exactly the skills that take you the next step into business leadership. I'm sorry you're not going to get to hear that speech. Here's the speech you're going to be relieved that you don't have to hear. This is the research speech. It's got lots of facts. Facts create a certain kind of stability and comfort for some people, maybe not this audience. We have a kind of odd relationship to facts. I mean, we choose not to notice that there is no fact that supports any value for children doing homework. There is no research that shows children doing homework actually pays off. We believe it, and so we sustain it, but the research is not there. Conversely, there's a whole lot of research about arts education, but we're not really choosing to believe it yet, even though it's a rather powerful case. In this fact-based speech, we would be talking about changes in the American economy. The sort of the catchphrase that is now being used is that the MFA is the new MBA. And an example of that, McKinsey & Company, which is a big consulting firm, heavy-duty business organization, in the last 11 years has reduced the number of MBAs it hires amongst its new employees by 33%. They used to hire 60% of their new employees were MBAs. Now it is 38%. So the skills are not coming from the business world, and increasingly they're coming from what artists can do. This speech would include some research about brain development. If we go to actually the little ones, it would have a poignant mention of the Mozart Makes You Smarter debacle, where a nice piece of interesting specific research got blown out of proportion and made us look like we believed in magic bullets. You know, that indeed made USA Today. I remember seeing it in USA Today, where they basically created the impression that if kids listen to Mozart for a few minutes, they get smarter. Specifically, their spatial intelligence is increased by about 15% for 10 minutes. When it kind of, the crash of the illusion came, we had to go back and kind of humbly start to work the research again. If you actually follow the research of those researchers, the second and third generations of that research, it's awesome what they have proven. That in fact there is probably no single activity a preschool student can engage in that develops neurons faster, that increases the complexity of thinking in the mind than music. And they have tested it against any other number of kinds of involvements kids have. Nothing works better than having them make music. This would include my favorite piece of research, which is that the very way we think uses an aesthetic template. Let me describe that. You know, all that interior goo of pre-thought stuff, endocepts is what they call it. All the stuff that's there before we actually have a thought. The process by which it blurps up into a thing that can be called a thought is purely aesthetic. And the degree to which an individual has a developed aesthetic sensibility, aesthetic not just meaning attractiveness, but being able to use multiple senses to make meaning, actually expands the range of thoughts they're going to be able to have for their life. Just as similarly, new research on language arts development, they're starting to zero in on the single most crucial piece for the development of language arts skills may be the number of words that a child heard at home in her earliest years. The sheer number of word count. And that kids that live in verbally depleted homes struggle much, much harder to gain language arts skills merely from the exposure, the word play that happened in their homes. And the coolest piece of research that I would have gotten to tell you about is from Antonio Damasio, the researcher who now divides cognitive function into two kinds. He calls them slow processing and fast processing. And he said that as we are getting faster with fast processing, with more technology, fast processing is information, visual, it's all that speedy stuff. His research shows humans are actually getting faster, that we are able to process faster right as technology is getting faster. But what his research has shown is that as fast processing gets faster, it comes to colonize and subjugate slow processing. And what slow processing includes is emotional development, moral development, reflective capacity. He predicted a few years ago we were going to see an outbreak of highly successful business leaders without ethics. And in fact, he describes this as a crisis of citizenship. And he said to that UNESCO conference, the world gathered, he said, arts education is the only solution to the worldwide citizenship crisis in the way our very brains function. But we won't go there. This is the speech I'm really sorry is to lose because it's the personal speech. This is the one where I get to talk about myself at great length. I would start by very modestly and seemingly without narcissistic focus on you. And I would start it, possibly even, as I have done with any number of business groups, but with a little pop quiz. This is a skewed sample here, but I might have asked you how many people in the room have made an important business or personal decision in the last 2 weeks based on your high school trigonometry or algebra? No hands, I see. How many people in the room have made an important business or personal decision in the last 2 weeks based on aesthetics? And let me remind you, aesthetics does not mean just the attractiveness of things. It is whether you made something based on a gut feeling or based on a sense of something or applying past knowledge in a fresh way to a new situation. List 3 or 4. Every hand is up. All right, now we know where we're going to start. We won't do that quiz. I won't even ask you how you learned the alphabet. Just a little reminder, by the way, that melody was by Mozart. This personal one is where we have the anecdotes about children's lives that are changed through the arts. Both those kids who were in a real struggling situation who found themselves and found a track through life. There's a lot of good stories like that. You all know them. They belong in every speech. It's a story of business people I encounter in every city who say, I attribute my success in business to my clarinet playing in middle school. I have not touched a clarinet in 37 years, but what I learned back then has stood me instead with habits I live with to this day. And it also includes stories that usually don't get much airplay. One I came across not long ago where I had a high school kid make a speech to kind of a big crowd, and she was nervous, and she made her speech, and it was to celebrate an occasion. And afterwards, I went to the head of the New York State Council on the Arts, and I said, what did you think of that kid's speech? And he said, perfectly nice. It was a nice speech. And, I said, yeah, isn't that great? It's like nothing world famous, but she did a really good job. And I said, oh, by the way, that Shakespeare program she talked about, well, that happened in Bellevue because her high school, she was a drug-addicted prostitute, and she was taken into Bellevue because they feared she was in a suicidal situation, and the Shakespeare program actually made her functional again, and now she's able to be a nice, normal kid who kind of makes an okay speech and has gone to college and isn't going to be an actress, but has an internship in an ad agency. So those are the thousands of invisible stories that are part of this speech you won't get to hear. I might have told you a little bit about my company because it actually has a good arts business connection. Here I was, a good old arts guy, and I started this company. I put my life savings into this not artsy company. You know, analyzing trends on American people's lifestyles and putting these highlight articles in newsletters for business people. And the customers, I discovered, did not care about the quality of our metaphors. They wanted their data, and they wanted it on time. And so I hired, with my life savings, the one person who knew about newsletters and research. I didn't know either. And we were getting these newsletters out, but they were really boring. And I was seeing my life savings slowly trickle down the drain of disinterest. And in desperation, I went to an out-of-work actor friend of mine. I said, do me a favor, over the weekend, take this horrible 500 pages of tables about how Americans spend their weekends, and would you turn this into, you know, like a 600-word article that a human might want to read? And so he did it, and he came back with this really cool, little, interesting, quirky article. I hired him, and I discovered that it was a good thing to hire others. Eventually, my staff was 13 out-of-work artists, all doing work. They were never officially qualified to be data analysts on trends, but the skills they brought for how to solve problems, how to speak directly to an audience, and add that something extra that Drucker's poetry class teaches, they made this America's largest company of its kind in 7 years. Really, the only downside was we couldn't let any customers come and look at our office because we look pretty bad. But indeed, it was that extra something that gave this company the opportunity to grow. And as I was saying, in business consulting, it is this strange dance of creativity but no art, or the kind of art's sensibility but let's not talk art, that has really been the thing businesses have wanted from me. I'll give you an example. I was hired to do a half-day retreat for the board of directors of a Fortune 500 company. And they wanted creativity but no art. Fine, I want the gig. So what we did was we started with a word game, a highly challenging word game, where they had to work really fast and put words together in interesting ways. And because I knew my clientele, it was competitive. You know, they had to go faster and more words and put them together better and more interesting. And so we went back and reworked our words 2 or 3 times. And in the final work through, I said, this last time you worked through your list of words, reshape it according to this personal experience you once had. That was interesting. So they went back, and they got about halfway through that step when they realized they were creating something that looked suspiciously like a poem. But it was too late! Because they already cared about the thing they were making. And they insisted on completing their poems, and because the competitive spirit was in the air, they had to hear every single poem, and they asked me to decide which was the best of the poems. So we had to create a rubric for the poem quality of this particular exercise, and afterwards we looked at what they had done, and it was exactly the training of an artist. Judgment of quality, making personal choices, adjusting, comparing your work with others, all the basic skills that a good arts education, and they felt refreshed, challenged, alive in a way they hadn't in a really long time. One other speech that I actually won't give, but I'll use it as the segue in the remaining 2 minutes for the speech that you will hear, is the arts education speech. This is one I love to give. It includes the research on the benefits of arts education. There's a dozen ways to sort of package the research. It's a huge collage at this point. I don't think we've packaged it very well, and the world isn't really listening very well. The gist of it, as I see it now, is we will never make a causal case, or the causal case will be pretty weak. We've already got a case that is so strong that connects work in theater arts with language arts gains that it takes a really hard-bitten cynic not to admit that this actually succeeds where many other efforts have failed. The other cases, it isn't that they aren't working, of the way the arts contribute to many other kinds of learning. The research isn't fully pieced together, or it's kind of wonky in terms of not making a good, strong holistic research case, but each of the cases is as strong. We just haven't quite put together the argument that says we're never going to have a causal case, and we have a collage that is now so rich that it is unconscionable not to take action for the benefits of our kids based on what the data says. It is so clear. And it isn't causal. So you're never going to get 2 hours of visual arts produces a 6-point gain. And you can't measure the things we care about most. We still haven't figured out how to weigh a decrease in boredom. And we still haven't felt the way you can document a lightening of the heart. These are the things we care about, but the actual collage of research is a strong circumstantial case, and I feel confident now making the statement that any school or school district that chooses to invest seriously in arts education will see an explosion of benefits that will include increased, we can't say which ones, but it's like mushrooms. They pop up all over. Increased attendance, teacher morale, improvement, school cohesion, the ones you started to list as well. These start popping up all over the place. Because we can't make the causal case, and because our society doesn't have much strength around the arts thinking, it's a hard push. And we're pushing steadily. I think we're getting better as advocates. The arts education speech includes the admission that there is no magic bullet, that it isn't easy and efficient to just administer more arts education. And okay, that's how it is. The benefits are that good that it's worth it. I think the case is coming up that in the No Child Left Behind era, which is in transition itself, we have to admit that amongst the unintended consequences, a word we're hearing a lot, is not only just that in many places arts contact time is reducing, but most poignantly, the worst unintended consequence from my point of view is that we have sucked the joy out of most of our teachers' lives. We have sucked the art out of their expression, and we're desiccating them as we're desiccating our school environments, and the arts are one of the few ways we can reinvigorate both our teachers and the quality of school life. So that I mentioned that reason back in 1900 of art for the sake of the workplace brought the arts into schools. There was another reason back then, which was good old art for art's sake. It was there back in 1900. Arts come in because maybe we can't research it and maybe we can't articulate it with clarity, but we just somehow know it's valuable for young people to have significant arts experiences. That thread is still alive and well, and we still can't research that thread particularly well, and we don't articulate it particularly efficiently, but it's enough to keep the arts from disappearing from the school plate when other pressures come. What's significant about our time and our topic today is that I think we're seeing the emergence of a third reason for the arts to be in schools. And I call it art for the sake of learning. We are getting it. That when a human is artistically engaged, something happens to that human. Now, I'm not talking about a human is just doing art stuff. Because you can have your hands on clay all day long and not have an arts experience. You know? Teacher told me to do social studies this morning. She told me to do clay this afternoon. It's gushier than social studies, but, okay, it's interesting. She has to be able to do something with this opportunity of clay in order to get those verbs of art in action. And I think that is where art for the sake of learning comes in, when the verbs of art kick in. There was some research a number of you have probably heard about, came from the Wallace Foundation a few years ago, called Gifts of the Muse. And basically, it took apart this issue that we've been beating ourselves up about in the arts for a long time. Like we really need to fight each other. Anyway, this is this two-sided argument. They call it the intrinsic benefits of the arts or the instrumental benefits of the arts. And they looked at it both in arts education and in society. For example, the arts in society, the inherent benefits are that it makes for richer lives, that it's, all the good stuff we love about the arts. That's the intrinsic benefits of the arts. And then there's all these instrumental ones. We revitalize downtowns, that we improve schools. The challenge that they brought up is nobody buys a ticket to the symphony in order to revitalize downtown. You only buy this ticket to the symphony if you believe you're going to have a personally resonant experience. And if that's happening enough, whoa, downtown gets revitalized. Similarly, in arts education, a kid does not invest herself in making clay in order to improve her social studies scores. But if indeed she has enough opportunities to get the inherent benefits of art, the learning wakes up, wow, her test scores seem to go up. So the idea is these are not in any kind of opposition. They're just in a particular kind of relationship. And what we need to remember in art for the sake of learning is you get those instrumental benefits to the degree that you go through the intrinsic. That is what unites them, are the verbs of art. David Bohm, the great physicist of the 20th century, he once said something that really has stayed with me. He said, anytime you see seeming polarities, like inherent instrumental, anytime you see seeming polarities, look for the larger truth that contains them both. And that's where our work in guiding this process needs to be. And on my view, and here's where I'm going to zero in on my real speech, it's about the verbs of art. I think we are at our weakest in the arts when we're in love with the nouns. And America defines art by its nouns. It's the paintings, it's the shows, and they're fantastic. But what brings them to life for the artist is the verbs that brought them to be. What brings them to life for the audience is the verbs they bring to that moment. I was once asked, I could even say in the worst moment of my professional career, I was being interviewed live on a morning talk show by a peppy young lady, and she said to me, Eric, we have just, here, I'll use my prop. Eric, we have just 2 minutes left at the end of this interview, so could you quickly close it out for us by giving us a very quick and clear distinction between art and entertainment? And how would you have done? Well, I will confess the hogwash that spewed out of me for 2 minutes was a humiliation to humankind. I had no idea, so it was a survival experience to just keep talking to make the time pass to the end of it, at which time I said, okay, what is the difference here? What is the distinction? And it is that entertainment, which is, please God, not the enemy of art, nor the opposite of art, what distinguishes entertainment is that it happens within what we already know. Entertainment, whether we laugh, cry, whatever our response, underneath it, entertainment says, yep, the world is the way you think it is. And that's great. That feels fantastic. To have these really skilled people in all these amazing ways confirm our worldview, that's worth money and time, and it feels great. Art, on the other hand, happens outside of what we already know. Inherent in the artistic experience, at the core of the artistic experience, is the capacity to expand our sense of the way the world is or might be. The art lies in that capacity. And it doesn't lie in the noun you're attending to. You got 3 people sitting next to each other, paid to come see that ballet company I tried to work with so many years ago. One is having a life-transforming art experience, understanding anew what is possible in terms of the human heart through what the choreographer and dancers can do. The next person over is having a very enjoyable evening, loving the buns of the ballet dancers, enjoying how relaxing the music is, taking little mental side trips to solve some problems at work and in the evening, but coming back and enjoying it ever so much, relaxing. Third person over is having a bad night out, was dragged, hates the ballet. The same noun becomes a work of art, a work of entertainment, or a nightmare based on those capacities with the verbs of art. And here is your new job title. We all now have the same job title. You can be grateful. When I talk to the suits of the arts, I make them take out their business card and scratch out the little line, that says Director of Marketing, San Francisco Symphony. Nope, cross it out. Your new job title is Agent of Artistic Experience. all of us, that classroom teacher, the usher, the performer, the marketing director, all of us facilitate other people's capacities to have this amazing catalytic thing happen in them that makes us participate in life. For Antonio Damasio, to become citizens, for a school to become learners, and for a business to become highly engaged, creative problem solvers. It is those verbs of art that we need to focus on, and to think of our role of agency. It's time for a little art activity, just to break up the barrage of words. And this is a fun one. Would you imagine with me, that won't be too difficult, that everything you see up here is a stage set for a play, including this little piece of it, and everything you see up here has been meticulously placed by the set designer. You know how they are. There is nothing arbitrary up there. Everything is there for a purpose. Given that, what are some things you get? You're sitting here, you paid your $43, and you're going to see the show, and you're waiting for the lights to go up, and what do you get about what the play is going to be about? What are some stuff you see that gives you hints and put together the strange pieces? What are you noticing? Okay, we got 2 environments and something else. 3, okay, we have a little debate on 3 or 4. All right, how many parts does the symphony have? 3, 4, good argument. So how many parts do we have? A good argument. What else? Great, so you're noticing one specific piece that stands out strongly for you that has a real ominous and a violent connotation. And how strange to have these 2 things together. Maybe there's some kind of violence going to be happening. Maybe that's the theme. Different ways that violence gets delivered. What else are you noticing? Okay, so we're noticing the pinpoints of technological reference. You know, we have different eras. 1, 2, 3, 4. All about communications and different historical eras. That's interesting. What else are you noticing? Okay, so there's a plainness and a kind of unpresentational ordinariness. Even our attractive podium is, you know, there's a kind of plainness, a homemadeness to it. Let me stop you right there. Notice for a moment the quality of your attention in the last minute and a half versus the 45 minutes before it. In that 45 minutes before it, you all were being very polite. You were doing what we do. You're sitting there pointed in the right direction, having your own little thing going on in there. You know, you're wondering about bathroom breaks and dinner and, you know, noticing my sneakers and, oh, that was kind of witty. I wonder what to apply. I wonder if I could use that. This little kind of jumble of stuff that goes on up here that passes for paying attention versus the quality of your attention when I just gave you the world's puniest arts activity. All I gave you was what if. And the tiny little invitation to use your imagination differently actually changes the inner chemistry. We start to notice what's there. We didn't even see this stuff before. And then when somebody points out something that we haven't noticed, we think, ooh, smart. You know, like, ooh, good one, yeah. And, you know, so that peer value goes up suddenly, which is why, as we heard before, the kids who struggle the hardest by standard measures of success seem to be the ones that have the most benefit from arts learning, partly because of this whole peer thing. We go, wow, that kid just came up with the coolest thing in the class. Suddenly, that kid is elevated, and a whole self-esteem issue arises. So the quality of our attention changes. Look at the idiom, to pay attention. I think we have this, it costs us something. I think the reason kids, once they get into some older grades, are trouble, you know, they can be difficult around paying attention, is they have been burnt on that exchange for so long. They have paid and paid and paid and gotten such a lousy return on that investment, they get real cautious about where they're going to pay again. And we bring in a different kind of experience economy when the arts invite kids well to trust, to a different kind of exchange that schools want this. Yeah, we're in school. We're going to let this happen in school. That you're going to be invited to put your attention out and get a different kind of reward that feels good and that changes the whole chemistry of the room. That is where we start to build those skills of attention that make all the difference. And it's as simple as changing the inner chemistry. That's the fabric under there. And a few years ago when I was writing a book, I asked a bunch of people in lots of different fields, what is the single thing that can happen in your day that changes it from being a pretty good day to a great day? I got all kinds of different answers that all boiled down to basically the same answer. I was in the flow experience. I was fully absorbed in something I cared about. They described many different expressions of it. My teaching, I was on in my teaching. Or there was a moment when I had a conversation with a friend where we came up with a new idea together. Or I was completely absorbed in a task at my desk. But it is the quality of attention that makes it, and it doesn't need to be more than a few minutes, that makes a day go from a good day to a great day. That is how potent these verbs of art are. And indeed, in terms of worker investment in a workplace, there is no more powerful tool than the capacity to apply your attention well and get into the flow zone in the work you care about. That is the worker you want. And the capacity for young people, and I'm not so sure we're really good at this in arts education yet, but I think it is a crucial capacity, is to teach young people how to find their intrinsically motivated way in to many different kinds of opportunities. Not just to say, oh, it's another damn thing they're imposing on me. I'll do it. I'll comply. And, you know, we impose extrinsic motivation drives 99% of a kid's official school life. And they, you know, that's how they function. We compel them to do lots and lots of things. And they comply. And then you grow out of school, and other systems compel you to do lots and lots of things. And the capacity to find those occasions when you can intrinsically invest, choose to do something for its own sake, take the clay opportunity and make something of it. Take the question from the teacher and not just regurgitate what's been asked, but go further or go goofy or go around the side of it or come up with something no one else had thought. To apply yourself, that's where you get the breakthroughs that business wants. And when people learn to navigate that appropriately, huge amount of difference. This notion of the education terms of intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, doing something for your own reasons or doing something for any of the other reasons in life, is a real crucial piece for me. There's a bit of research, you may be aware, that equates work in the arts with young people's levels of self-esteem. I actually think that's not what the research says at all, but we'll take whatever positive impressions we can get. As I read the research, it equates increases in self-esteem with engaging in intrinsically motivated tasks. And the arts are one of the few places in a school life where kids are allowed, invited, supported, and celebrated for the capacity to do that. Here's the scary part of the research, as I read it, says that if you engage in a task for intrinsic reasons, you find a way to make it your own. And if you complete that task and are witnessed for having completed it, even if the final result is only kind of so-so, it didn't get an A, it didn't get put on the bulletin board, it doesn't matter, your self-esteem goes up. For the mere fact that you accomplished that inner act, completed it, and were witnessed, this amazing human chemistry happens. Conversely, if you engage in a task for extrinsic reasons, complete it, and are witnessed for having completed it, even if it is the A-plus, reward-winning, best in the room, your self-esteem goes down, even at the highest success, which is why I think we have so many high-achieving depressed kids. They've become magnificent at manipulating the extrinsic motivation game. All the while, they are getting further and further away from the essential human act of being able to put yourself into a task and have the courage to offer your ideas out to the world in the belief they want to see them. The act of human voice, the courage of participation. And it is in that capacity to take extrinsically motivated situations and find a way to invest. Man, if a person can do that in any work situation, that is the person who will rise to the top. You talk to any corporate leader, and it was their love for the work, not their capacity to keep hammering it out, that constituted their leadership qualities. I learned a great lesson from this from a sculptor friend of mine. As you know, sculptors don't get many gigs. You don't usually hear sculptors referred to in the workplace speech. Anyway, she, kind of made a life as a sculptor, and then she got this amazing commission to create a bust of Henry Kissinger. She hates Henry Kissinger. But it's a great gig. It's the gig of a lifetime. Good money, high profile, could launch her career, so she says yes. The whole while she is working on this, every day she is coming to work on this mock-up of him. She's hating his face. She's thinking, what am I doing prostituting what I most love in my life to glorify this creep? I hate what I'm doing. Hating her life. Every single day, the quality of her life is going down at what should be the apex of her professional success, until a friend of hers told her about a new patina, a new reflective surface that you could get on bronze through a chemical treatment, and she decides to use it on Kissinger. Suddenly, she is fascinated to work on Kissinger. Suddenly, the size of his nose that had been driving her crazy became a huge advantage because of its great reflective surface. And every day, her life is getting better. And all that happened was she was able to switch from extrinsic motivation to intrinsic motivation. I want to talk about just a few more of these verbs of art that I think we need to focus on as arts educators, and that business people resonate with if we use the right vocabulary and if we bring experiences into our advocacy. A second one I want to talk about is what I call response ability, which is the capacity to have an authentic response. Not the response you're supposed to have, not the response the teacher expects you to have, not the response that business is going to approve of, but the response that you have. That is a true artist's capacity to take new experience, touch down into something about who you are, and come back out with your own response to it. Etymologically, the word respond means promise back. That is where personal voice comes from. That's where you get a kid who can write an essay that gets a 5 on an AP exam as opposed to a 2. That is where you get the worker who can see the same pattern and come up with the piece that no one else ever would have thought of. That is a habit of mind, response ability. And it is developed better in the arts than anywhere else, and it will carry that capacity for individual voice the rest of her life. And where else in a school life do we support young people to believe their judgment is to be trusted? We do almost everything we can to undermine young people's belief that their judgment is to be trusted. And the arts are the place where we can confirm that with a constant touching in and recognition of the quality of that most simple, basic act. There is the verb of making connections. I think you noticed in my definition of art the capacity to expand the sense of the way the world is or might be. That is the same definition as learning. I think arts education is a redundant phrase. I think we're talking about the same human capacity to expand our set of connections that hold our understanding of what is so. And schools are all for kids making connections. It's just schools, with all due respect, have put pretty much all of their chips on the making of logical connections. There's nothing wrong with logical connections. It's just human beings were born with this wide array of ways that we make connections to things, and we're going to spend the vast majority of our professional lives using that wide array if we want to succeed. Sure, you want the logical piece there, But man, we make body connections to things. We make emotional connections to things. We make spiritual. We make interpersonal connections. The arts are the way we open wide the ways in which kids can be successful, expanding their sense of the way the world is or might be. That is where we support them to be able to make worlds, and to be able to make worlds no one else has ever made before. And as all the business literature tells us, that is the sine qua non of a 21st century worker success. Someone who can imagine a world and function in it that we don't currently have. You've heard all the statistics about how fast things are changing, how most of the jobs that now exist won't even exist by the time these youngsters are out in the work world. They need to be able to navigate unknown terrain, make connections within the moment, and expand them with whatever new comes in. And they learn that in the arts better than anywhere else. There's a bunch of other verbs we could talk about, which we're not going to in this speech, of making choices and attending to their consequence. All of the education programs of Manhattan Theater Club are built around that notion, choice and consequence. You can bet the character ed people love them. And indeed, it's a fundamental act of art. It's a fundamental act of functioning in professional relationships, too. Making choices and attending to the consequences. We could talk about decision-making in the absence of rules. What artists do all the time, and what we do in a constantly shifting workplace. We could talk about the capacity to self-assess. We could talk about empathetic capacities. We could talk about analogical thinking. But instead, we're going to end with my favorite verb of art that I think lies very close to that intrinsic-extrinsic idea, which is the verb of yearning. It is the fuel that makes us bother. When some goofball walks into your afternoon and says, hey, check out this space. What kind of a play do you... It is only yearning that will make you bother to engage in that opportunity out of the sense of that something could come here. Let me try. I have a hunch. I'm going to pay my attention. I'm going to go for it here. Or when someone says, read the U.S. Constitution, to actually pour yourself into that opportunity in the belief that you can get something of value. Yearning is that essential human hunger for more of that which you personally care about. And here's the most important thing I'll say tonight. We are in the yearning business. Our job is to wake up the yearning of young people that has been numbed and anesthetized and suppressed by all the systems they function in, and let them feel what it feels like. Let them feel the courage of putting it out to make stuff so they get the sense of satisfaction, and let them see how what they make has value in the world. That is the yearning cycle that creates lifelong yearners, which is really the understory of lifelong learners. And it is the arts that can bring that to a school. And when you have that yearning, you begin to find the art of everything. It was in my lifetime they referred to the art of bricklaying and the medical arts. You may still have in towns around Georgia the medical arts building. We've become much more scientific. But in my time, we used to think that any undertaking taken to its fullest committed expression became an art. That's what we can bring to businesses that are hungry for people who want to find the art of any endeavor they're in. That's why my company succeeded. Everybody in there wanted to take each little goofy article about dog names and make it something that was good, and even better than good. That yearning capacity drives success. It's the one U.S. advantage we've got, that kind of creative urge. I want to end with a few quotes, and we'll have time for a few questions, I think. This first quote is about yearning, and it's an extremely pretentious quote. I apologize in advance because it's a quote from me, but unless I read it, I always botch it. So this says, people are shaped by what they extend themselves into. We must be very careful with the objects we present to ourselves and to our children because we are changed by them. Art lends shape to yearning. Art is the best container for yearning because it is so rich, so human, so satisfying on so many levels. Art gives serious outer shape to serious inner yearning. And if these yearnings are informed by less rich objects, they go to sleep, they die, or eventually express themselves in the harmful symptoms of search that fill the pages of the daily paper. So we're not just talking about workforce preparedness. Really, our mission is life participation preparedness, and the arts are right at the heart of it. There's a quote, another pretentious quote, from Plato that sort of positions this sense of the verbs that I've been talking about. He says there is one thing a society must accomplish above all others if it's going to succeed. One thing above all others to succeed. And that one thing doesn't have to do with governments, doesn't have to do with institutions, doesn't have to do with the military or the economy. The one thing a society must do is teach its young people to find pleasure in the right things. There is no righter right thing than making stuff you care about and having the courage and commitment to put it out in the world and go with the response. The arts are the key piece to the small community of a classroom, to the larger community of a school or a neighborhood, or the strange community of a business setting. The arts are the catalytic pleasure because we do what feels good. And if we can create the pleasure, the hunger, the yearning for that experience in the young, they yearn for a lifetime. And finally, I want to end with a stanza of a poem that actually captures this strange mix we hope to bring to business, which is the mix of the artist self and the very practical self. Because we want workers who know how to function in these strange and demanding environments of the workplace, but we also want this other stuff. And how do we keep that balance? How do we keep that balance in schools that are hardly exquisitely designed institutions to celebrate the delicate tendrils of yearning? Tough, intractable, recalcitrant media for making art in, for educators. So how do we keep this balance? And the balance is best described in this stanza I want to close with by Robert Frost's poem, Two Tramps in Mud Time. And it goes like this. But yield who will to their separation. My object in living is to unite my avocation and my vocation as my two eyes make one in sight. Only where love and need are one. And the work is play for mortal stakes. Is the work ever really done for heaven and the future's sakes? Thank you. Great. Okay. Okay. No. Thank you. All right. Thank you all. Very nice. Thank you. So we have an opportunity for something a little more like an exchange. Questions, challenges, thoughts, adumbrations?
Combining our scientific events yesterday with your expertise in market research, what can the arts do to be psychological loners?
What can the arts do for psychological loners? Well, it's glib to say that more contact at a young age with high-quality opportunities. I mean, interesting, one of his teachers, I just was reading a little in the Times today, said disturbing things had been coming out of his writing. So that was that was like one of the few markers that we had. That would have come out a lot earlier with highly attentive artistic support. I know certainly disturbed kids, any school I go to, the counselor and the teacher spot them, get them into counseling when they're young, get them the kind of support they need, find out usually horrendous things that they're living through that is leading them to what's going on in there. But the only facile answer I have is that would have been caught a whole lot earlier, given the opportunity to get out what's going on in there. Not that arts are used as therapies, but the stuff comes out. And it's a way we can find out what's going on in there. Interestingly, it's Juilliard, where I work, they've had a problem over the years with extreme depression amongst kids. They've had a few suicides, and they really want to deal with this. And so we started a mentor program that partly deals with kids, and the mentors were very comfortable, and, oh yes, I'm a great mentor. I can tell you endless stories of my life. That's mentoring, right? And in the training of those mentors, we brought in the psychological services department from Juilliard to talk to them for 2 or 3 hours about what comes through their doors. And it was extraordinary to see these lifetime teachers at Juilliard who thought because the kid always put on the best face when they're with the teacher, their career, everything depends on pleasing the teacher, they had no idea of the dark underbelly that they were causing on a daily basis, that the kid was going through for whatever reasons. And it was truly shocking to them to hear what was behind the facade that they had allowed themselves to not attend to. And so I think the arts give us peaks for kids who are troubled. And indeed, the research is really clear that the kids who do the best, the great equity issue. A little side note, one of my favorite moments of the last 5 years, the Los Angeles Unified School District was over budget and live on television where they do their school board meetings. They had to cut $60 million in a live TV show. Talk about reality TV. And Roy Romer, the former governor of Colorado, who is their school superintendent, said, okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're cutting $60 million on TV tonight. We're going to go through the list of departments in our school district one by one and decide on the cuts. And first up will be arts education, which had poignantly just changed its name from the visual and performing arts. They were now first. And so what are we going to cut out of arts education? The school board superintendent, the president of the school board stood up and said, there'll be no cuts in arts education. And he said, excuse me, $60 million, every department's going to take a cut. And she said, not on my watch. I have become convinced arts education is an equity issue. And I will not see our neediest kids cut off at the knees by the one way they have to become successful in our system. And indeed, arts education was the only line on that budget that year that did not get a cut. Yeah. Others? And was it a fight over that issue, or did it? Fantastic. Yeah. As dark as the No Child Left Behind era has made it seem for arts education, I'm actually quite hopeful. I see all the other trends, and I'm a trend analyst, I see all the other trends heading our way. I see more and more discussion of the primacy of creativity. I see more and more talk about classroom culture and school culture. I think things are really coming our way, and it's just a few years from now, 2 years, maybe 3 years. You bet.
Musicians who are self-taught have a lot of difficulty accepting a lot of different things because they haven't taken place and haven't developed their discipline.
Mm-hmm.
The school musician, serious musicians, classical musicians, those kinds, follow systems extremely well.
Yep.
But you know, not all corporations are looking for creative people.
Right.
In fact, in my experience, the last 20 years, the whole worksite environment has changed to the extent that creativity is reserved only for those people up there on my staff. The rest of the people don't need to question. That's when the musician is
Mm-hmm.
really, really good.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess my conclusion is those people, arts and education has been there, yet there's no appreciable appreciation of the arts. Could it be that we don't have a standard for what is good arts education, and we're letting schlock teachers in there that do more harm than good over the long run?
Okay, a couple of answers. First of all, I absolutely agree that we indeed are not uniformly high quality in the arts education we deliver. And even where we have pretty good arts education, it is certainly not well coordinated to focus on these areas that I care most about. We got some work to do within our own field. I think there's some ways to start to bring it together. Regarding the NASCAR, and wait a minute, we're doing a fair amount of arts education. Actually, in terms of number of minutes, we're not doing much arts education. In fact, in the U.S. scope versus the world, I was amazed to learn the average UNESCO country, a kid has 146 hours of arts education a year, and in the U.S. it averages 43. So that's just, I mean, we're pretty small in terms of allocation, and that frail reed really can't hold a lot of sway in the cultural influence that is hitting those kids all day, every day. And there's nothing wrong with, maybe they're having high-quality NASCAR experiences, there's lots of reasons they would go to NASCAR. We have not had the opportunity to actually create the feel of what the arts offer. I'm forever telling people in the arts, man, we had better deliver the goods when they come to symphony. Because $70? Man, there's a whole lot more entertaining things you can do. You can go to the movies 7 times. You know, you can have a lot more entertaining experiences. We better be able to deliver this extra thing and deliver it consistently. And we better prepare people because they can't just go in the buildings and actually have those kinds of experiences largely. That we got a lot of work to do if we want to have a viable arts community. And it happens to work out, in my view, that the very thing we are doing in preparing for that happens to prepare people really well to succeed in life. That it isn't just that we're preparing them to go become symphony patrons. We're actually preparing them to be complex thinkers, to be able to decode unfamiliar information, to be able to work well with others with empathetic connections. So I think it's actually worth a school's investing in, because I can't justify that a school should invest lots of money so that we'll have theater subscribers. It's a good outcome, but in terms of the quality of our offerings, man, I'm not so sure the arts have really found a way to deliver enough experiential content for the cash. And we better figure out how to prepare people for it and make sure we deliver it, because that's the only thing that's worth $70 in our discretionary income competitive environment. In terms of getting better at arts education, we're going to have to do it. You mean education standards, like national, state? Yeah. Yeah. I think it's all on a continuum. In other words, I think absolutely there's what makes for high quality ballet. Absolutely. I don't want to demean that or diminish that or dumb it down so others can think they're doing great. And I want all the native entry things to feel good. I want it to be lined up with that. I want kids to understand what excellence means. Let me give you an example. In playwriting, I care a lot about high-quality plays. If I'm working with 4th graders, I might want them, I am not recommending this, I am actually thinking this thought even as we speak, but I might want them to write a play about disgustingness. They are geniuses at disgustingness. They will establish standards. They will exceed whatever standards of disgustingness I might have in mind. And they will write a play about disgustingness and not sleep at night in order to make it more disgusting the next day, because that's where their aesthetic passion lies. What's interesting to me is I don't want to create standards of disgustingness, but I want them considering elements of quality. So what in your disgusting play was it that made it a strong play? What are the theatrical elements you're using that as your aesthetic judgment matures and you go past disgustingness and toward love, how do you apply now? And what is relevant to you so you've got the reach? So I'm interested in the standards around the verbs. I think the nouns separate us. And I think the nouns make us go, oh, that's ballet, I suck at dancing. Or, oh, that's classical music, that's art, but I don't know from no art. Because Americans think they're artistically incompetent. I'm looking at those verbs that are actually on a continuum. I had this amazing moment with a guy on a bus. He was the bus driver at one of these conferences, and he was driving a bus full of arts people from one fancy arts location to another fancy arts location. And I was talking to the bus driver, and I said, you know who you got on the bus? He said, oh, yeah, I know, a bunch of arts people. I said, do you do anything in the arts? And he said, oh, no, I don't do anything in the arts. The arts have nothing to do with my life. Within a minute, he said, you know, it's Christmas time, and it's funny, all 5 of my kids are home. They all play musical instruments, and, you know, they just like play music in the house all day long. That juxtaposed thoughts were, I have absolutely nothing to do with the arts, and my children are improvising music in my house 24 hours a day. That's where we get stuck. It feels good to make that music, and the arts need to reclaim that. I don't know how, but I do know it's partly to do with attitude. The assignment that my Juilliard students, these were grad students of music learning to become teaching artists, the assignment they dreaded more than any other, they lay awake at night in terror of, was that they had to get on a New York City public bus and engage people in substantive conversations about classical music before they got off. That was the assignment. They were scared to death of what was going to happen to them. They thought they'd be attacked, you know. And almost invariably, they discovered that if you start talking about music and discover and be actually listening to where other people's musical interests are, they'd say, wow, you know, like everybody's really into music. Uh-huh. Yeah. And after you have shared some of what your musical interests and cares and what excites you about it, they're interested to hear what your particular expertise is. In fact, the fact that you played a violin for 16 years is like really interesting at that point. But if somebody comes in, you know, I played the violin for 16 years, it's coming from the wrong place. So I'm looking to find that arts education that comes from the big we place, the way community artists tend to do, to come from there and point, as people able to see it, what that ballet dancer is actually doing, how incredible it actually is. Because once you've played around with it a little bit, it's much clearer. The standards become clear, and I don't want those standards lowered. In fact, I hear it said that in the music world anyway, the training of classical musicians at this time in America is at a higher standard than at any time in human history. So our standards are way up there, and we just don't have a good way to bring people in through the pleasure of it, so they're going to begin to be yearning their way toward the 16-year arc. And that they're going to be happy if they decide to stop after 5. Yeah, it's huge. Maybe time for one more question, comment? Yes. Good.
And it is amazing how an 80-year-old person can use jigsaw. I feel everything. But it's just made because they think that they've done everything in 80 years.
Right.
But to pick up a paintbrush and see how motor skill and the think music and all that's just amazing to me. Even before that is very interesting to me because we often forget about the older population, but they want to enjoy art as well.
Yeah.
And the place I
Yeah.
to do your work.
Uh-huh.
And so, but I do sometimes give them little birds, okay, I want you to do it this certain type of way. But I find it interesting that people who are highly educated and people who are educating themselves can come together in meetings.
Mm-hmm.
So like you said, how? How are you going to be respected in that meeting? Just because I didn't, get my degree in music doesn't mean that my love and passion for art is enough to be my present.
Right.
So, but I just thought that I was mentioning that about the early population and also
Absolutely. In fact, the arts are frequently used as an intergenerational mixing point. The National Center for Creative Aging was founded by a dance teaching artist. Indeed, the arts are really making a big foray into quality of life of older people. And we should even mention one of the obvious research things is that schools get better when parents and families are involved. The number one way that gets families involved in schools is through the arts. The research is abundantly clear. It's there for us. So here is not only art for the sake of learning, but art as catalyst for bringing people together. And it worked 10,000 years ago, that one, and we're rediscovering the power of it through you and your unconventionality and the fact that you want them to make stuff that they never made before. Yep. Yeah. And it's a whole different conversation that they have. It's a whole different relationship. All right, we need to end. Thank you for having us. Gig I am asked to do in business is, Eric, come, we want to do stuff on creativity, but no art.